You go in there and start disrupting the market, positive or negatively. You can make great decisions off great data, but you can make really bad decisions
off bad
off bad data.
Yeah. Communication obviously is key in any business anyways, right? And it just adds some additional challenges when you have multi-site locations. Operating multi-site facilities is not as easy, and I'm learning this as we go here, folks. So it's not as easy as what it sounds, and I'm facing all of these challenges that we're talking about today. Welcome to Chasing Millions podcast. I'm Eric.
And I'm Josh.
And today we're going to be talking about the challenges of operating a multi-site company. And the reason why we're going to talk about this is I'm going through it right now. I'm living it. So we have a facility here in Tulsa. We just opened one up in Oklahoma City. I'm facing some challenges. And then looking forward, we're looking at multiple states right now. We've got some LOIs out at multiple states to expand our business, scale our business, as you guys probably well know if you're following our podcast. So if you are not subscribed, please subscribe, like the video, and let's get going.
That's right. So Eric, let's talk about this. So as you guys...
Well, hold on. You know what I forgot to tell him?
What?
I forgot to tell him that you have some immediate experience and went through, owned a company, had multi-sites, right? And so you've actually experienced some of the things that I'm going through right now, which is very nice for me because I get some good feedback, right? So having people around you that have done some of these experiences is vitally critical to saving the bad decision making, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, at the end of the day, you got to ask yourself, why am I going to another location? Do I feel like I've explored every option in the current location I have and I'm operating in? Because one thing to take in consideration, folks, is when you're looking to expand into another city or state, in this case, we're same city, right? There's a lot of different procedures and systems and personnel and KPIs, and there's so many things that you need to take into consideration, right? It's easy to walk out your door and see what's going wrong, but when it could be 1,200 miles away or it could be 50, but either way, in your case, it's 60 to 80 miles away in a totally different city. Different cultures. And we'll go through all this on the bullet points. But yes, I have operated in multiple states and multiple cities, and there's some challenges that go with that. But why did I do that? Why do you want to go into a different state? Why do you want to go into another city? Well, it's opportunity.
Yeah, I would say for me is just strictly opportunity. And, we've been in the Tulsa market now for, going on 5 years or hair over, something to that effect.
Yeah.
And we have been very fortunate and captured a fair amount of market share here. And
quit being humble. You're the largest portable restaurant company you are in the state of Oklahoma, and you're by far the largest in Northeast Oklahoma. So in my eyes, looking at your company, being a part of it, if, the only way you really can grow on a significant, keep the pace that you're growing at, is you're going to have to tap into new markets. And in this case, we elected to go to Oklahoma City.
Yeah, and you said it best. And I think Oklahoma City for me, without getting too far off track here, Oklahoma City for me was a pretty easy one because I physically can easily drive there. Now it is boring and it is time consuming, but it's not like it's kind of in my backyard, right? So that is, in my opinion, from what I've learned so far, that is going to be well easier managed than something like, hey, if I went 2 states over.
Yeah, and we'll talk about a few of these things. So listen, there's 1,000 reasons why you should go into, and reasons why you'd want to go into a different city or a different state. There's 1,000 reasons not to, but we're going to give you some challenges that I have overcome and challenges I continue to go through.
Yep.
And things that as a newer entrepreneur going through a different city that you have never experienced, and what challenges you're facing.
Yep.
So we'll give you some quick bullet points.
Yep. And hope you get a lot from it. So
yeah. So let's cover. Yeah. You want to start it?
Yeah, I'll start it up. So first one is maintaining consistent quality and standards throughout. So you might be wondering, well, what the heck is he talking about? Well, so and let's just talk about my industry. So we have toilets, containers, fencing, and dumpsters, right? And I have some processes, and in those processes include a quality standard of what I'm producing and giving to the end client. Well, it's very easy for me to know right now when I'm driving and I'm driving down the road and I'm seeing those pieces of equipment and I
Yeah.
can stop in there or I can go to this event and I can stop in those toilets or take a look at that dumpster or that shipping container office or whatever it may be, they're right here in my backyard. So for me to control that is very simple to some degree, right? A lot more simple than such as in Oklahoma City or another outlying state where you can't just walk in your backyard and go take a look at it, right?
Well, another thing too is quality is everything in your business. Quality of service.
Yeah.
You're in the you're in the service game, right? You're in portable restroom, dumpsters. For you guys that don't know, Eric operates one of the largest privately owned dumpster, portable restroom, temporary fencing, and office storage container companies in Oklahoma.
Yep.
So, but one thing you haven't mentioned on is when you move into a new territory, you really need to do research from culture to what your competitors are doing. So, for instance, this case, Eric's moving to Oklahoma City. Their whole systems, how people that you service might be different from what you do in Tulsa,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you go in there and start disrupting the market, positive or negatively. They might not be used to how consistency of billing. Everybody down there might be on 30-day billing cycle. Eric might be on 28, right?
Yeah.
There's so many factors that go into it, right? So you got to understand, does that territory meet your model? And then can you adapt to it?
Yeah. No, that's a very good point.
And then on top of that, in your industry, you have to consistent. You got to be consistent on the level of service. So you better be very grounded. You better have good people. You better train them. And as a president, you have to be willing to go down there and ensure those things are happening.
Yeah, and I think, obviously there's challenges there for anybody that would be in my shoes or in a like kind situation. I have a family of two getting ready to be three come on Monday. And as you can imagine, popping over to Dallas or popping over to Nashville or whatever is not as easy, right, as you may sound. So that's a very good point, and I'll follow up with that and talk about standards, right? And why that's very important is yeah, I have a set of standards for each division of what they follow, and I can tell that they're following it because I'm right here. But obviously there's a challenge if you're not there and you can't see it. So, setting those processes, those procedures, and training those managers in those facilities and what your expectations are, and making sure that they are upholding those. When you come in town and you have a set agenda, like myself, I would come in town and have a set agenda to check quality standards. Look at communication pieces, look at the inventory, look at such and such and such and such, right? And being able to manage that at a level at a multi-site odds a lot of challenges. So being very, very consistent in your training and in your processes and holding people accountable to those is going to be what I can tell going to be one of the most major pieces for me.
Well, the people that do it the best are hotel chains. You go check into Hampton or a
Those are a
Marriott.
little easier.
Well, let's think about food quality, something you're sticking in your mouth. A
Mm,
cheeseburger, McDonald's,
they're
or a
probably the best example.
nice coffee, Starbucks. You have people that operate chains worldwide, but their product is consistent, and people know when they go order from a McDonald's or a Starbucks, or go lay their head in a Marriott or a Hilton. They know they know somewhat of the quality of product they're going to get, no matter who is serving them. And that's
Amen.
what we're trying to do here at On Call. It doesn't matter what city you're going into or what state you want to go try to take over, right? You want to have the consistency of product and the consistency of service and billing and blah blah blah. So how do you do that in my world is you oversimplify it.
Yeah.
So you make it so simple that you can scale it.
Yeah.
So that goes back to point number 2,
Yep.
and that's communication and coordination. Holy moly. Having a single site, being a single site operator, being a multi site operator in your world, it's easy to walk next door and talk to your ops guy. It's easy to walk next door and talk to a few of your driver's leads and figure out what's going on in their life. If you're operating multiple cities and depending on how you're set up corporately, your accountants might be spread out, your dispatchers might be spread out, your GMs, general managers might be spread out, right? We have a little bit different operation here. We're always evolving too. But how do you communicate with those people at a far,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Especially when there's time zone differences or something like
A
that
hundred
that could
percent.
completely impact, right? So that's something you need to think about and keep in consideration.
There's so many different ways to communicate nowadays, through text, through calls, through emails. There's thousands of ways that we didn't have back in the day to
Mm-hmm.
communicate. But communication and coordination. How do you coordinate a route? Ours is centralized. We like to have all of our routes, because we're Tulsa based. Have it all centralized out of one location
Mm-hmm.
in one room, so we can go there and still coordinate throughout all of our branches. But that's a huge thing that I had to overcome, is being able to communicate, being able to over communicate, because you always tend to over communicate with something that's close by, right?
Yeah.
There's a little conversations that people overhear to understand what's going on, but when
Mm-hmm.
they're 1,200 miles away or 50 miles away, you have to learn how to communicate with them, and you cannot forget about them, right? From my experiences, what happened to me when I started years ago in multiple cities and I decided to branch out is I still always communicate with my local branch the most.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look back on it and you're like, man, why is this branch still killing it? Well, because you're making those micro adjustments really quickly on this one branch to make it kill it,
Mm-hmm.
versus somebody that's
Because
at a
it's your home
far,
branch and it's
yeah,
easy.
you're doing less adjustments, therefore they're not growing always at the rate you hoped them to be.
Yeah, and communication obviously is key in any business, anyways, right? And it just adds some additional challenges when you have multi-site locations, right? And how you choose to communicate is obviously going to be up to you, right? I'm a phone call guy. I like to just make the phone calls.
Well, how do you get your phone systems to work and ring? When do you get your employees, if you're operating in multiple states like you think you are or you want to be, and you're in different time zones, you have to have people show up way earlier than anticipated in this time zone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're starting at different times.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many factors that you have to play a part in, right? Culture. Who's answering the phone?
Mm-hmm.
Right? If a northeastern guy answers a phone or woman versus an Oklahomian, you can tell they're not from this area.
Yeah, I know. That's funny you say that because we're always talking about whoever answers the phone on the other line, and we're like, especially whenever they outsource, companies outsource that phone call after hours or
Yeah,
whatever, and we're
exactly.
always bitching about it. It's like talked to the guy in Bangladesh earlier today, right? And you're like, man, sometimes those barriers are difficult.
Exactly.
So those are communication things that you got to consider and think about. And we do that today. So
Another thing that you need to consideration, another hot topic is, in our case, you have a lot of inventory. You have thousands and thousands of assets out in the field, in the yard, how you
yep,
maintain those assets, how you store them, how you tag them out, if
yep,
they're ready to go, run out again, or they're not. So, supply chain management, where do you order your products to supply your business?
yep.
And then how do you maintain your assets or in your yard from afar?
Well, yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because this is something that we were just dealing with. Was it sounds ridiculous and it sounds like it wouldn't be that complicated, but even serializing assets in different areas that are all kind of communicating into one software, right, and delineating your inventory from one location to the next, and because what in my expectation is always I need an inventory report per location, right? So
100%.
you have to be able to get that information, delineate it correctly, and not not jumble it up so that this asset number you don't know for sure whether or not it's a Tulsa or a Fayetteville, right, or something to that effect. So even something as simple as serializing your assets, and if you have multi-site locations, you really need to pay attention to them and think through that, right? And it wasn't as simple as this will work, right? It was, hey, we really got to dive in and start thinking about, hey, especially if you have a location that is, within driving distance, is very handy, right? Because if I'm short on inventory over here,
Mm-hmm.
I could, if I wanted to, shift it over here 2 hours away. But then what does that do?
Yep.
Right? Now you have a serialized asset in Oklahoma City that is over here in Tulsa, right? With the branding for Oklahoma City with their number. What kind of implications does that
Oh, that's
have?
a great thing. Back on communication, you know what I mean? Do you have the communication of your a 405 or 918 or a 58 area code or 612?
Yep.
Or do you have a 800 area code when you go into multiple cities and multiple states? There's so many options. And if you're watching this, you have to do what's best for you. And I don't think any one of them is better than the other,
Yeah,
right?
there's not a one shop. It's in a one shop stop. Right.
Exactly. And I think you have to take your industry in consideration. You got to take how large you want to get into consideration.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many things that you got to take the product, you're pushing into consideration. There's so many different factors when it comes to that. But inventory is huge.
It's a big one.
It's easy to go out your door right here and say, I have 4 dumpsters left.
Yeah.
I need to order more.
Yeah.
But when it's far away, you're really, 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 really dependent on your systems that you put in place and the software you put in place and the people that you put in place to operate the systems and software to make sure that they're doing their job. So you can goes back to our previous podcast that we did earlier, is understanding your data. The data, you can make great decisions off great data, but you can make really bad decisions
off bad
data.
Yeah.
Right. And if you haven't seen this, we have a previous episode. We talk about data points. We talk about how important that is. And watch that video because I think that will tie into this video of why it's so important.
Yep.
So inventory is huge, but inventory could be selling T-shirts. It could be selling hats. It could be selling Twinkies. It doesn't really matter. Yep. But you have to have systems in place to manage inventory.
Yeah, and that kind of ties into the last thing I'll say on inventory. And it's kind of generalized here, but is set your processes and your systems up so that it can generate reports that you get automated, right? So somebody like myself up here in my shoes is I want to try to automate with my systems as much as I can to be able to get reports sent to me that are auto-generated that are saying, hey, you have X in this facility. You have X in that facility. It may be labor hours. It may be inventory. It may be whatever, right? But anything that you can, if you can automate that in a report, specifically in inventory, you're going to want to do that.
100%.
Yep.
And this goes back to another point that we're about to touch on is supply chain. Supply chain, in your case, you burn through a lot of toilet paper. You're burned through chemical, fuel, tires, maintenance products on your vehicles, 1,000 things, right? Let's go to topic number 4. Do you buy central? Do you buy from corporate or do you buy it localized, right? And in your business, and if you're watching this episode and you made it this far, I think you're going to understand, you're going to be thinking in your head, well, what business am I in? And then how do I order supplies? There's going to be certain providers, it doesn't matter how large you are or how many different states and cities you're in, you're going to have to utilize local resources, right? And there's also going to be products, I'll give you an example. Tires, we can set up national accounts for tires, right? Chemical, we can set up national accounts and drop ship chemical. But you better have good data points when to order it.
Yeah, and it all comes back to data, right? And decision making, I'm glad you brought that up, but decision making on locations, in different locations, you better think through that, right? Because if there is a threshold limit, right, in a decision in a central location, there really should be, right? Is that you're going to put a manager over that place, and then he may have some minions under him, right? And then you got your service people, but that individual, I only want that individual to speak up to a certain amount. Does that make sense? Meaning that if he wants to place an order of 3 new trucks that's going to cost me $250,000, or actually probably a lot more than that, but of $500,000, right? Then if you're a president or in the shoes where you're operating all of these facilities, decision making, you need to take that into consideration in every single site location and systemize that.
Well, let's give them examples. So if you're watching this, let me give you an example of a centralized corporate decision-making ability. How Eric orders his trucks and what brand. He uses Kenworth. We use MHC. Who he buys chemical for to supply his toilets. Payroll, right? Benefits. Their phone systems.
Yep, those are corporate
technology. What operating software he uses.
Yep.
A localized decision-making ability that you're usually going to have to establish. A lot of our yards have gravel. Who orders where we get our gravel from to supply the yards to maintain our yards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes food, who do we cater food in? You're not going to have a corporate account for every little thing, right? I'll give you another example. Office supplies.
Well, if we're talking about food and we're ordering food in, Always Andolini's.
Yeah, so there's local supplies could be just down to your notebook, pen and paper, ink cartridges. You're gonna have to give, in my opinion, your local yard some flexibility to establish your own local relationships, and sometimes, in our case, we use people that use us, right?
A lot of times, yeah.
So we try to use people that support us, and we want to support them. So inventory, chain management, centralize your buying, and it doesn't just have to be buying, it could be services, right? Rendered, and localized decision making are going to be imperative. And those are things you'll never get pushed until you go into another city. And that's why one reason I wanted to start with you in a closer city than I started with. I made a humongous mistake and I went too far away too quick.
Mm-hmm.
And it created a lot of issues I had to overcome in a never very fair fashion. It wasn't very fun.
Well, that seems to be the model that we have is that we run it as hard as we can until it breaks and then we fix it. We run hard, we run
Yeah.
till it breaks and you fix it.
So let's go to something that was the last point I would make. If your challenges of operating a multi-site location is my very first location outside of my corporate location was in Little Rock, Arkansas. And nothing against anything against Arkansas, but the culture there is a lot different from Tulsa, Oklahoma. And although it was only 4.5 hours away, but those are things that you need to take in consideration. Is drive time, types of people, what they're into. I
The
tell you what.
buyers.
Well, how about this? The climate.
Yeah.
I feel like that Little Rock, Arkansas rained every other day. That's why they have rice fields everywhere.
Yeah.
I feel like we're in the process of delivering to construction sites and heavy equipment to construction sites, and I feel like that our trucks were getting stuck a lot more out there.
Yeah.
And they have accent. And you bring in Little Rock for us, we brought in an outside general manager, and everybody knew immediately he wasn't from that area
Yeah.
because he really didn't have anything in common with those people.
Yeah.
So he was a great person, but it was really a setback in a learning curve.
Yeah, and I think you can kind of tie that back into some of these other points of, managing your workforce in different locations. It could go down to as granular as the training could be different here as it is in South Dakota because of the weather,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or recruiting could be different because it's in such a remote place you can't find anybody on Indeed. You got to go to Walmart or whatever, right?
Well,
Or
think
Quick
about
Trip
DOT. Your interstate versus interstate,
I mean, that's a very
right?
good
Labor
point.
laws.
Yep.
I mean, remember there's different unemployment laws and labor laws and
Yeah.
HR and all this stuff.
Yep.
That you
Pay,
had
how about pay, right? I mean, I imagine scales and pay are different with cost of living in different locations.
100%. That's
So,
another thing.
yeah,
Holy
so if you're
moly!
in California, right, you're likely going to make more dollars doing the same thing as you are in Tulsa because the cost of living is 10x over in California as it is here in Oklahoma.
100%.
You see what I'm saying? So
Yep.
there are so many factors, even when it comes to hiring in your workforce in multi-site locations
Banking.
that you have to be looking at, right? To your point, banking, right? You don't want to get a centralized Tulsa bank that only banks in Tulsa if you've got sites all over the United States. It's going to cause some challenges there
Yeah. So
that you may
now,
not have if you had a Bank of America that's worldwide or whatever. So operating multi-site facilities is not as easy, and I'm learning this as we go here, folks. So it's not as easy as what it sounds, and I'm facing all of these challenges that we're talking about today, right? And like I had said at the beginning of this, is thank gosh I have somebody on my side and on my team that has been through it. Maybe not every single line item here, right? But regardless, is keeping people around you that know and have some abilities and have some expertise in different things, whether it be multi-site locations or whatever it is that you're going after. Having, if not a partner, having somebody that you could call or turn to for questions, right? Because if you don't, you better be the Google master because there's a lot to it. So
I would say some key reflective bullet points you need to think about is if the biggest thing you got to think about is are you as a leader willing to spend your time away from your family because and your friends because starting a new yard is going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of attention, right? And you're going to be pushing yourself. It's like almost starting over
yeah,
because some of the same systems that you already thought that were great, you're going to have to completely revamp,
yeah,
right? Because those only work for one site,
yeah.
right? But at the end of the day, if you're willing to take on those challenges, the squeeze can be worth it. The time spent can be worth it. The scalability, the just everything, just giving you the internal confidence that, hey, look, I can operate like a big boy.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? I don't have to be a small mom and pop shop in a single site location. I can push myself, overcome these barriers, and let's go grab this. And then once you get 1 or 2 yards, at that point, the sky's the limit. Really, it's like, how far do you want to go?
Once you've proven yourself, and then that opens up a lot of other doors too.
And that's why one reason, one thing that we're really exploring is the private equity world, which is goes back to another story. We're gonna have a previous episode talking about private equity because we're interviewing private equity companies right now. Why do we want to talk private equity? Because we're willing to take on this challenge and we think we're going to be successful.
Yeah.
I've been successful in with having multiple cities and multiple states service companies, and I know you are too. So we think that one of the easiest way to grow is to offer the high level of service and the quality product that we offer and a lot more people and going
And
into different
maintaining that
cities.
in the different site
The only way
locations.
we're making more money is we have to service more people,
Yeah.
right? It's pretty simple formula.
Yeah.
So how do you do that, and what products you're in, and what service business you're in, or what business you're in general is determining what state you tap into first.
So, guys, thank you for watching. Hope you get a lot out of this. If you haven't liked and subscribed, please do. Our next episode coming up that we'll do next time, I think it's going to be under branding. So that'll be
Well,
fun.
that kind of ties into this too.
It does. I mean, it really does. So, you're probably gonna be able to get both. So if you see both of those, watch both of them. They'll kind of tie in together. But fun episode on the next one talking about branding, and that's one of my things I really like. Branding
Yeah.
is fun. So thank you for watching. See you next time.